Hello, welcome to this Bible study of the Banking Blessings Ministry. Today we are going to look at the death of Saul and Jonathan and how David mourned for them. Remember, in a previous Bible study, the Israelites and the Philistines were setting up for war. For David had followed his Philistine host Achish, intending to fight on his side, but the Philistine commanders rejected him and David was sent back. He went back to his base at Ziklag. The things that happened there were already studied in another Bible study. But that war didn't go well for Israel. As a matter of fact, the Philistines defeated Israel in this war, and the Israeli soldiers ran helter-skelter and tried to run away. Several of them were killed, and Saul and his son Jonathan and two other sons were killed in this battle. When David received the information, he and his men mourned for Saul and Jonathan. In this Bible study, we're going to look at the mourning, try to understand why David mourned for them and how he mourned for them. We will learn about the mourning and lamentations of David. He lamented for Saul and Jonathan, for the army of the Lord and the house of Israel. And we will look at why David mourned, and his mourning for the house of Israel helps us study the spiritual meaning of mourning. Everything we will do today is in 1 Samuel chapter 31 and 2 Samuel chapter 1. We will begin with the death of Saul. As I said, the Philistines defeated Israel at Mount Gilboa, the war in which David intended to fight on the side of Achish, but it didn't happen. So he was sent back. He was rejected by Philistine commanders and sent back. So the Philistines defeated Israel in that war. The Israelites fled, and several of them died. The Philistines killed Jonathan and his two brothers, and Saul was critically wounded. But when he felt that he wasn't going to be able to run away, and he did not want to be captured alive, he asked his armor bearer to drive his sword into him and kill him. But his armor bearer refused. He was too afraid to do it. So Saul put his sword on the ground and fell. He fell on his own sword and died. So it was a sad day for Israel as a whole, because they were defeated and their commanders were killed. Their king, in fact, was killed. Let us read about this in the Word of God. 1 Samuel chapter 31, verses 1 through 6. Now the Philistines fought against Israel. The Israelites fled before them, and many fell slain on Mount Gilboa. The Philistines pressed hard after Saul and his sons, and they killed his sons Jonathan, Abinadab, and Malchishua. The fighting grew fierce around Saul, and when the archers overtook him, they wounded him critically. Saul said to his armor bearer, "Draw your sword and run me through, or these uncircumcised fellows will come and run me through and abuse me." But his armor bearer was terrified and would not do it. So Saul took his own sword and fell on it. When the armor bearer saw that Saul was dead, he too fell on his sword and died with him. So Saul and his 3 sons and his armor bearer and all his men died together that same day. It was indeed a sad day. The Israelites, when they heard that their soldiers were defeated, they abandoned their towns and ran. And the Philistines occupied the towns. And the next day, when they went into the battlefield to see what happened, to strip the dead, they called it, they found Saul and his sons, and they were overjoyed that they killed the king of Israel and his sons. They took their bodies, cut off their head, and danced around, and then they fastened their bodies to the wall to display them so that people will come and see that they indeed killed Saul. This was very sad, but the people of Jabesh Gilead, in the night, their men went to the place where they had fastened Saul's body to the wall, Saul and Jonathan, and they took the bodies down, took them back, cremated them, and buried their bones at Jabesh Gilead. They gave Saul and Jonathan a proper burial because they did not like the way that the Philistines abused their bodies. Let us read about this in 1 Samuel chapter 31, verses 7 to 13. 1 Samuel chapter 31, verse 7. When the Israelites along the valley and those across the Jordan saw that the Israeli army had fled and that Saul and his sons had died, they abandoned their towns and fled, and the Philistines came and occupied them. The next day, when the Philistines came to strip the dead, they found Saul and his 3 sons falling on Mount Gilboa. They cut off his head and stripped off his armor, and they sent messengers throughout the land of the Philistines to proclaim the news in the temple of their idols and among their people. They put his armor in the temple of the Ashtoreths and fastened his body to the wall of Bethshan. When the people of Jabesh Gilead heard of what the Philistines had done to Saul, all their valiant men journeyed through the night to Bethshan. They took down the bodies of Saul and his sons from the wall of Bethshan and went to Jabesh, where they burned them. Then they took their bones and buried them under a tamarisk tree at Jabesh, and they fasted for 7 days. Well, remember, David was in Ziklag. He had just finished his interaction with the Amalekites. Then, about 2 days later or so, somebody came from the camp. A man arrived, and his head was all dirty and all that. And David asked him, who are you? Where do you come from? And he said he came from the war front, from the battlefront. And then David asked him, David's interest picked up. He said, okay, what happened? Can you tell me? So the man informed David that the Israeli army was defeated by the Philistines. He told David that Israel fled from the battle and that they were pursued and many of them fell and were killed. Then the most important, he reported to David that Saul and Jonathan died on Mount Gilboa. And David asked him, how do you know all this? How do you know that Saul and Jonathan are dead? Then he talked about how he came across Saul and that Saul was still alive, but died, and that Saul asked him to finish him off, and that he did. So this man claimed, the man that came to report to David, claimed that he killed Saul. But what we saw in the story was that Saul actually finished himself. He fell on his sword. The man took Saul's ring and crown and brought them to David and said, "This is evidence." He had evidence, all right, but we don't know whether it. I believe he lied. He wanted more. The Bible doesn't tell us that, but for him to claim that he killed Saul meant he wanted something out of this. Let us read about this in 2 Samuel chapter 1, verses 1 through 10. 2 Samuel chapter 1, verse 1. After the death of Saul, David returned from defeating the Amalekites and stayed in Ziklag 2 days. On the third day, a man arrived from Saul's camp with his clothes torn and with dust on his head. When he came to David, he fell to the ground to pay him honor. "Where have you come from?" David asked him. He answered, "I have escaped from the Israeli camp." "What happened?" David asked. "Tell me." He said, "The men fled from the battle. Many of them fell and died, and Saul and his son Jonathan are dead." Then David said to the young man who brought him the report, "How do you know that Saul and his son Jonathan are dead?" "I happened to be on Mount Gilboa," the young man said, "and there was Saul leaning on his spear, with the chariots and riders almost upon him. When he turned around and saw me, he called out to me, and I said, 'What can I do?' He asked me, 'Who are you?' 'An Amalekite,' I answered. Then he said to me, 'Stand over me and kill me. I'm in the throes of death, but I'm still alive.' So I stood over him and killed him, because I knew that after he had fallen, he could not survive. And I took the crown that was on his head and the band on his arm, and have brought them here to my Lord." There are small pieces of evidence that this man lied. One of them is that he said Saul fell on his spear. Well, it wasn't a spear, it was a sword. There is every reason to doubt this man's story. Obviously, the basic fact was that Saul and Jonathan were dead. But the role he claimed that he played in the death does not appear to be substantiated, appears to be doubtful. But David was really sad at the death of Saul. He and his men tore their clothes, which is one of the first ways they announced mourning, announced sadness, announced something bad that has happened. So they tore their clothes, they mourned for Saul and Jonathan. They mourned for the army of the Lord. We'll go through this in more detail. They mourned for the house of Israel. Then David turned to the man that brought the news and asked him, said, "Why were you not afraid to strike the Lord's anointed?" You remember, David has this great respect for, not just for Saul as an individual, but Saul because of the fact that he occupied the throne of Israel and was anointed by God to occupy that throne. So David felt that no man should be able to kill him. So he asked this man, "Why were you not afraid to stretch your hand against the Lord's anointed?" Well, the man explained himself, but his explanation was not satisfactory, and David ordered him executed, and he was executed. His crime being that he killed the Lord's anointed. It is quite possible that he didn't kill Saul, but by claiming that he killed Saul, he bought his own death. Let us read about this in 2 Samuel chapter 1 verses 11 through 16. 2 Samuel chapter 1 verse 11. Then David and all the men with him took hold of their clothes and tore them. They mourned and wept and fasted till evening for Saul and his son Jonathan, and for the army of the Lord and the house of Israel, because they had fallen by the sword. David said to the young man who brought him the report, "Where are you from?" "I am the son of an alien, an Amalekite," he answered. David asked him, "Why were you not afraid to lift your hands to destroy the Lord's anointed?" Then David called one of his men and said, "Go strike him down." So he struck him down and he died. For David has said to him, "Your blood be on your own head. Your own mouth testified against you when you said, 'I killed the Lord's anointed.'" Then David wrote this beautiful poem to lament the death of Saul and Jonathan. We're going to look at that lament in somewhat detail. The lament is in 2 Samuel chapter 1. We'll start from verse 19. First of all, David lamented for the Israeli army. In 2 Samuel chapter 1 verse 19, he says, "Your glory, O Israel, lies slain on your heights. How the mighty have fallen." Your glory, O Israel, lies slain on your heights. How the mighty have fallen. So this is a lament for the Israeli army. The Israeli army for him was the army of the Lord, and defeat of the Israeli army was a serious thing for David. He considered the Israeli army to be invincible because it is backed by the living God. So for him, it's unheard of that the Israeli army should be defeated at war, especially by the Philistines who did not worship God. So he lamented for the Israeli army. He said, "Your glory, O Israel, lies slain on your heights. How the mighty have fallen." Then he cautioned the Philistines. As part of the lament, he cautioned the Philistines to not celebrate, saying, "Look, this is not over. Don't go celebrating. It's not over yet. We are coming back." In 2 Samuel chapter 1 verse 20, which is the next line of the lament, he wrote, "Tell it not in Gath, proclaim it not in the streets of Ashkelon, lest the daughters of the Philistines be glad, lest the daughters of the uncircumcised rejoice." So he was telling the Philistines, don't rejoice, this is not over. Then he admonished the location. Part of the lamentation was he admonished the location where Saul and Jonathan died. This is the third part of the lamentation, which is in 2 Samuel 1 verse 21. He writes, "O mountains of Gilboa, may you have neither dew nor rain, nor fields that yield offerings of grain. For there the shield of the mighty was defiled, the shield of Saul no longer rubbed with oil." So it's admonished the location. This is a practice. He's saying, look, you took more than you can handle. You should not. It's of course the location had nothing to do with it, but it's a way of saying that a mighty thing happened at this location. The fourth part of the lamentation, David honored Saul and Jonathan for their life and accomplishments. In verses 22 and 23, he wrote, "From the blood of the slain, from the flesh of the mighty, the bow of Jonathan did not turn back. The sword of Saul did not return unsatisfied." Saul and Jonathan, in life they were loved and gracious, and in death they were not parted. They were swifter than eagles. They were stronger than lions. Then in the fifth part of the lament, he counseled Israelites to mourn Saul. He said, "Look, you've lost a great man. He did a lot of good things for you. You need to mourn him." Let us read from verses 24 and 25 of 2 Samuel chapter 1. "O daughters of Israel, weep for Saul, who clothed you in scarlet and finery, who adorned your garments with ornaments of gold. How the mighty have fallen in battle. Jonathan lies slain on your heights." Then in the final part of the lament, he lamented specially for Jonathan. Remember, David and Jonathan shared a very special relationship, which we described in a previous Bible study. They loved each other, they respected each other, they admired each other, and they loved God together. So in the final part of the lament, which is in 2 Samuel chapter 1, verses 26 and 27, David wrote, "I grieve for you, Jonathan, my brother. You were very dear to me. Your love for me was wonderful, more wonderful than that of women. How the mighty have fallen. The weapons of war have perished." The weapons of war have perished. Here he was referring to Jonathan. Remember, Jonathan and David were very close. Both of them expected David to be king one day. And Jonathan had promised to support David, in fact, promised to serve as David's second in command. David knew that Jonathan was a very brave man. Based on his history, Jonathan knew that David was a brave man. So both of them expected to accomplish a lot together. So when Jonathan's life ended like this, David referred to him as the weapons of war have perished. Well, why did David mourn for Saul? So now let us look at the mournings. We've looked at the mourning, now let us look at the reason. What really was David doing when he mourned for these people and organizations? Well, he mourned for Saul because Saul was God's anointed king of Israel. David always made the point of referring to Saul as the God's anointed. David had a great respect for the throne. He had great respect for authority, knowing that the authority that Saul had was given to him by God. And the Saul's occupation of the throne was ordained by God because God anointed him king. So David had, in his great respect for that authority, it's true that he and Saul had problems and came very close to being killed by Saul a number of times. He had every reason to hate Saul, but it wasn't really about Saul. It was about Saul the authority over Israel. Saul that was on the throne of Israel. Saul that was anointed king by God. So David believed that because of these reasons, that whoever was in that position deserved respect and did not deserve to die the way Saul died. So he mourned for Saul. He mourned for the authority of the throne of Israel. In Romans 13 verse 1, much later, several generations later, when Paul the apostle wrote a letter to the Romans, in chapter 13 verse 1, he informed them about the importance of respect for authority. He said every authority comes from God. So this is helping, this is sort of emphasizing David's attitude to Saul throughout their interactions and up to his death. He had great respect for the authority that Saul was holding, because authority comes from God. This attitude of David is towards Saul teaches us a lot. When somebody is placed in a position of authority over you, it's not a simple thing. God sends messages to us through the people that are in authority, that He has placed in authority over us. So for you to get these messages, you have to relate to these people in a way that shows recognition of their authority. You have to respect them. You have to obey their authority. Respect for authority is very important, not only because it helps maintain order in a society, but also because the authority came from God, and at times in your interaction with the authority, you may pick up messages that God sends you through the person that holds the authority. David taught us this, and the Apostle Paul taught us again through his letter to the Romans. In Romans 13 chapter 1, Romans chapter 13 verse 1, it says, everyone must submit himself to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. So this is Apostle Paul summarizing, essentially explaining to us why David had so much respect for Saul. Well, what about Jonathan? Why did David mourn for Jonathan? We know that David admired Jonathan greatly because of Jonathan's bravery, faith, and friendship. Jonathan led Israel to victory over the Philistines in the Battle of Michmash. You remember when the Philistines got ready to attack Israel in a number so overwhelming that the Israeli soldiers were running away. Were hiding wherever they could. And Jonathan attacked an outpost of the Philistines and defeated the outpost, and then sent panic. That action sent panic through the Philistine camp. As a result of which the Philistines ran helter-skelter, and the Israelites pursued them, and Israel defeated Philistine in that battle. So David knows this about Jonathan, and it's one of the reasons he admired Jonathan so much. And of course, the victory came in a manner that showed the hand of God, which again David also admired, because he saw Jonathan as a man of great faith in God, somebody that acted following directions or following his belief and faith in God. In that particular battle, in fact, the Bible told us that the panic was panic sent by God. So David had great admiration for Jonathan, and this is why he mourned Jonathan. He expected to accomplish a lot with Jonathan. We saw where he addressed him, he talked about him as the weapons of war had perished. So he expected to accomplish a lot with Jonathan. Jonathan was his close advisor. Several times David went to Jonathan, or Jonathan met with David to advise him on different things, especially in David's interaction with his father, and also to strengthen David spiritually, telling him, oh, I know you will be king one day. Don't worry, my father is not going to be able to do anything to you. So he prayed with David, he prophesied to David, and he promised to work with David, to support David in whichever way he could, to help him become the best king that he could be. So his death meant a lot to David, and that's why David mourned Jonathan. He really lost an ally, his closest and most important ally at that point in time. Why did David mourn for the Israeli army? For David, the Israeli army was the army of God, and it was invincible, should not be defeated by any in war at all. How could you defeat the army of God? So defeat of the Israeli army to David meant that God had turned away. And David mourned because of that. That God had turned away from the army. God had turned away from Israel. So he mourned for the army, for the Israeli army, and then mourned for the house of Israel. This mourning helps us, gives us an opportunity to look at the spiritual meaning of mourning, because what David was doing here is said that the people of Israel had done something that made God depart from them. And this is why they were defeated at this war. So he was mourning the fact that God departed from Israel. So when somebody is sad and regret, that is, has great sadness and regret for sin, that is a component of mourning, that you are sad for something you have done. David was sad that Israel had done something that made God turn away. So this great sadness and regret for sin is an important component of mourning. Because remember, sin makes God turn away from us. So that there is a parallel here. David was mourning for the house of Israel because Israel had done something that made God turn away from them. So when you sin and you know that sin will make God turn away from you, then regret for that sin is an important component of mourning. An acknowledgement of the sin, recognizing what it is you have done and acknowledging it. That's an important component of mourning. Another important component is repentance, where you truly recognize you've done something that you shouldn't do and you repent doing it, you regret doing it, and then you confess. That's the acknowledgement. You confess this sin to God. All of these things, that is sadness and regret for sin, acknowledgement of sin, repentance and confession, these are all components of spiritual mourning. Then another thing that goes with it is a renewed commitment to not do this, a renewed commitment to God, which means a commitment to not do whatever it is you did, or anything that looks like it, or anything that will be considered sin. So that making a renewed commitment to God is a component of spiritual mourning. Then you ask for forgiveness. That is also a component of spiritual mourning. This is why in Matthew chapter 5 verse 4, it says, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." So David's mourning for the house of Israel gives us an opportunity to look at in detail what does mourning, spiritual mourning. Obviously, when somebody died, you mourn for the death of that person. That's a different thing. Spiritual mourning, it's really the whole process of being sad that you've done something that you shouldn't do, regretting it, acknowledging that you did it, and repenting, that is promising yourself you'll never do it again, then renewing your commitment to God and asking for forgiveness. All of these taken together make up what is called mourning, spiritual mourning, and that is the type of mourning that we are told in Matthew 5, that those who mourn are blessed, for they will be comforted. Well, what have we learned today? We learned that David mourned for Saul because he respected and appreciated Saul's authority as king of Israel. He mourned for Jonathan because he admired Jonathan and expected to accomplish a lot with him. So Jonathan's death was a great loss. He mourned for the Israeli army because defeat of the Israeli army meant God had turned away from Israel. The Israeli army, of course, was the army of the living God. So there was no way they could be defeated except God turned away. So David recognized that the defeat of the Israeli army in this battle meant that God had turned away from the army. He mourned for the house of Israel because he believed that Israel lost favor with God. And that's why the army was defeated. So he regretted God's turning away, and he mourned. He went through the whole process of mourning for Israel spiritually. Well, this is our Bible study today. It's a short one. We hope that people that will participate in this Bible study in the future will learn something good, something that will make a positive impact on their life. And we pray that what you learn will help you make a positive impact on other people's life and will draw you closer to God's purpose for your life. Thank you for listening. God bless you.